Reddit, what's the most chaotic good thing you've ever seen? Story 1. I teach English as a foreign language to high schoolers. I have one class where the class clown is always trying to be disruptive, but his method is to shout encouragement whenever someone answers a question, like, "You a genius," or "You so intelligent." I have to act annoyed because I know he'll stop doing it if he ever knew how much I love it. Story 2. I like putting coins in the treat machines at the local zoo's goat feeding station. It's fun to see the kids so excited and the parents pissed that they're forced to stop and let their kids feed the goats. Not super chaotic, but hey, $20 goes a long way. Story 3. I've never seen it personally, but I rather like Richard Ancrum's guerrilla public service. There was a sign on a freeway in the Los Angeles area that was providing confusing directions, so he fabricated an overlay to Caltrans standards and installed it himself without any sort of government permission. Caltrans eventually found out, inspected it, and allowed it to stay. Story 4. I was leaving a client meeting in a dodgy part of town. Social worker and a person walking on the street had something stolen from them and shrieks. Suddenly this other guy jumps out of a trash bin in the parking lot he was dumpster diving, hops on his bicycle and chased that down. It was pretty incredible. Edit. Guess I didn't interpret the question correctly. I was thinking good deed that came out of nowhere. Still glad you enjoyed the story though. Story 5. Friend of mine used to live in downtown Toronto. At one point she'd given a spare comforter to a homeless man to keep warm through our hellish winters. Fast forward a couple months and she's cutting through the park at night to get to her apartment. Some guy stops her, clearly with bad intentions. Looks grim. Comforter bro comes flying out of nowhere with comforter draped like a cape. Bad dude is scared shitless and runs. Comforter bro escorts friend through park to safety. Karma. Story 6. By far, the city of São Paulo never cleaned its tunnels, so they got black from all the car fumes over the years. This guy cleaned skull drawings in the soot using a rag and some water. The city sent officials to try and stop him, but hey, he was cleaning, no vandalism there. Eventually they sent someone with a hose to clean this guy's vandalism for good, only to discover how dirty the walls truly were. Story 7. My grandma was a kindergarten teacher for 50 years. Yup, you read that right. She retired at the mandatory age of 72. It was a small community, most economically okay, but some poverty. Every few years grandma would develop a case of the clumsy. She'd trip while watering the plants and wouldn't you know it, but she'd spill a bit of water on the child that was unwashed and wore the same clothes for weeks. Nothing for it but to make up for her mistake by giving him a bath and clean clothes, then return the clothes she messed up after she cleaned them. A case of clumsy would last the whole school year, and oddly enough she tripped near the same child every time. The case of clumsy often meant she miscounted her grandchildren every morning and made an extra lunch. Would you mind taking it so it doesn't go to waste? Story 8. Me and a friend got some black spray paint, and went to an underpass near us that had a bunch of gang tags and profanities all over it. We covered as many as we could before the cop saw us. The cop was super chill, let us finish covering everything up, but forced us to give him the spray cans we had, and brought us home. He was chill enough to drop us off a little distance away from our houses, so we didn't get seen by our parents or anything, told us we have a great mindset, but needed to apply ourselves to more legal and beneficial things. Story 9. About the Great British Bake Off hosts. When contestants do cry out of frustration or disappointment, generally Mel and Sue stand near them and use a narrable language so the embarrassing footage is tainted, and won't make it into the final edit. Story 10. I had a friend whose neighbor had a dog. I was at friend's house one day and noticed that the dog was chained to a very large tree in the shared backyard with no food or water dishes nearby. We lived in northern Arizona at the very beginning of the summer. I commented on the weight of the chain as I filled a dish with water to my friend. She told me that they leave her outside 247 rain or shine and occasionally come out and just dump a bag of food on the ground. I was horrified. She was a sweetheart. I also noticed that she looked like she'd recently had puppies, but I saw none. My friend didn't know where they went, but we found out from another neighbor that they'd all died. I was completely heartbroken. I started coming to my friend's house almost every day to visit her. Found out her name was Mia. She was so sweet and surprisingly enough not shy at all unless you raised your voice or looked threatening even a little, then she'd immediately roll onto her back and pee. She was perfect and I couldn't let her live like this anymore. So one night about 2 weeks after ID met her, I came over to my friend's house with some borrowed bolt cutters in the middle of the night. We stole Mia. I took her home and immediately got her in the tub. I don't think the poor thing had ever had a bath before. She was so terrified of the water. I ended up sitting down in the tub with her while we bathed her. We had to rinse and repeat 4 times before we got all the dirt and hair and grime off of her. My pipes ended up clogged because of the hair. We then gave her as much food and water as she could possibly want, and then quickly discovered she went bananas over a laser pointer. She was my sweet girl, but unfortunately we had her less than a month. We lived in a small town and a kid recognized her as her aunt's dog. I immediately found a friend that owned a ranch with sheep and plenty of room to run, and he took her, and she has an absolutely amazing life. Now she's a red healer, so it makes complete sense. The very next day after sending her away I got a knock on my door. It was the woman and her young children. They asked if ID seen their dog with the woman laying on the guilt thick that her children missed her greatly. ID spent hours sitting outside with this dog and never once saw any of these people. I played dumb and told her that if I saw her dog ID let her know. She didn't believe me, so I invited her inside to see for herself. There wasn't a trace of Mia in the house. I immediately took down the pictures ID posted on social media as well just in case. People who treat animals like that, ID do it again in a heartbeat. Edit. Oh my lord, this blew up. I figured it was gonna just get lost in the pits of Reddit, but nope, instead RIP my inbox and my first ever gold. I'm seriously touched. Thank you wonderful strangers, and I'm glad my story of my sweet girl can touch other people too. Wanksy would spray paint penises around potholes so the government would fix them. Example. Story 11. I flunked my final years of secondary school because I was being rebellious. I ended up in college doing a tech course because I left school with basically no qualifications. The majority of other students had learning disabilities or were basically heading to prison. All of them but me and one other girl had support workers. I befriended one guy, I'll call him Ryan. Ryan was a good kid from an abusive household, had serious anger management issues and would often flip out during class when he got frustrated. He was a funny guy but always got into trouble. One time whilst waiting for a lesson in the college library, he jokingly was messing with a fire extinguisher and set it off, spraying the corridor and some students. There was an investigation into who set it off, and I took the blame for it. In a meeting with the principal, who knew blatantly it wasn't me, I explained Ryan needed this course more than I did. I ended up being expelled from the college and went on and applied myself to become a web developer. Years later I found Ryan on Facebook. He had finished his course, gone on to do carpentry and had a wife and 2 kids and had stayed out of trouble and was now self-employed. Edit word, 2. Edit 2 should clarify. This was an English college in the southwest of England 13 years ago when you could leave school at the age of 16. Edit 3. Thank you so much for the gold. Never expected that. Story 12. The time I did something like this, I worked in daycare, and over the summer the kids had to bring their own lunch. One extremely undernourished and developmentally behind toddler only got things like chocolate frosting between slices of white bread for lunch. I started packing extra of my own lunch with healthy stuff like yogurt and fresh vegetables and sat her on my lap each lunchtime and coaxed her to eat. It was totally against the rules and probably illegal, but the lead teacher and I couldn't just sit there and watch her literally eat frosting for lunch, so I got permission to take over myself. We just kept it quiet. Story 13. In high school, 2 random girls who had nothing to do with me and never spoke to me before or after that occasion came up to me. They said, "We saw M treat you like trash and heard her talk about you and your family. You're coming with us now and you're gonna confront her, and if she doesn't say sorry you're gonna punch her until she apologizes and promises to never mistreat you again. You can't let her do that to you, but we know you won't say anything, so we'll help you out with this. If we get caught, you tell them the teachers we forced you to do it." Of course such a thing was against the rules. We were supposed to inform teachers about bullying and not confront others by ourselves. Except the teachers didn't really care, and so the bullies got away with it. This resulted in the school having a rampant bullying and violence issue. I knew fighting was against the rules and was scared of being suspended or worse. And besides that, I'd rather let someone bully me than hurt anyone. But no matter how Lil ol me tried to get out of the situation, the girls would not accept no for an answer. So I was forced to go up to my bully who had been treating me like for the past couple months and confront her, with the 2 girls right behind me. They were bent on not letting me or her continue with this any longer. They even said, "Hey, this girl here has something to say to you," so that I had no other choice than to actually do exactly what they told me to do. Once I confronted her, the girl went real quiet, apologized all nicely and never bothered me again. And that's how 2 strangers, who saw that I was being mistreated and didn't give about breaking the rules, taught me how to stand up for myself. Story 14. That video where a guy paid for everyone's food if they were behind them just because 2 girls cut in front of him. I think it was in N Out. The video's been reposted many times on any social media. Story 15. It's on Funny where a gas station clerk blasted a guy with a fire extinguisher because he refused to put out his cigarette at the gas pump. Edit link. Story 16. I sometimes call apartment complexes that I know don't offer recycling service and I pretend to be interested in an apartment. Then I ask if they have recycling and back out once they say no. I do this to the same ones from different numbers over the course of a few months so they don't get suspicious. Sometimes I have friends call too. So far only one has added recycling, but I'm still working on the others. Story 17. This one actually happened yesterday at work. A girl and her mom came in and got a few sandwiches, but the girl wanted a brownie. They were paying cash, but were like $3 short for the brownie. The girl didn't throw a fit or anything, but was pretty sad. I was just gonna let them take it, it's just a brownie, but before I can say anything, the guy behind them says I would like all but 5 of your brownies. Mind you, this is like 40 brownies, which costs like $110 of just brownies. He proceeds to then give the girl all of the brownies, which needed 3 bags just to carry all of them. The girl was ecstatic, and everyone else was laughing their off. Well, never forget you, brownie man. Story 18. Friend's mother found out her husband Friend's father was part of a child pornography group when the police showed up to arrest him. Head realized they were about to get him, so was trying to escape the country via the local airport. Head told her his mother was sick and he was going to visit. She not only told the police where he was, but raced them to him. Slide tackled him at the airport before he disappeared and was in the process of beating him to a pulp when the police arrived and pulled her off of him. Story 19. When I was in high school, I was an extremely troubled teen. Legal trouble, drug usage, violence, mental illness, failing every class, the whole gamut. When I was in 11th grade, I was put into a special education program for people like me, and I did wonderfully. I adored my teachers and vice versa. One teacher in particular was especially amazing. She helped me set goals, get on track. She even helped me find my first real job. My senior year I was doing really well in my classes, but this school was set up like a college in that you needed a set amount of credits to graduate, and I was woefully short. I still needed something like 22 or 24 credits, completely impossible to make up in my last year. Even though I was doing well, there was no chance I was going to graduate, so my lovely teacher started digging through my record. She somehow converted my community service, treatment stays, lockup time, all of the consequences for my behavior into credits. She turned institutionalization into freaking elective credits. By the end of my senior year, I had 1/2 credit to make up in summer school. I was able to walk with my class for graduation in June, and received my high school diploma in August. To this day I have no idea how she did it, but she absolutely changed my life. Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. Story 20. When I was still in my medical training in L.A., I often saw middle-aged gentlemen putting coins into expired meters. The one time I saw a meter maid try to approach him and he ran off giggling. A few months later I saw him at a stop sign in a Maserati, basically the definition of chaotic good. Story 21. When I used to walk home from class at night, there's this dude always there that would always call me gangsta, major respect but never anything else for reference. I'm a 19-year-old short Hawaiian girl, and not very threatening looking, well call him JD. He'd ask how my day was, if I'm getting home okay, if I had any problems getting home etc. I began to look forward to it when I walked home from class. A couple of times I would be having a bad day and this fella, who was outside rain or shine, would always say hi to me. One day, I was walking back and he was talking to a buddy. Said buddy looked me over and whistled, to which JD whacked him on the shoulder and said angrily show some respect, and smiled at me and said you have a good night, gangsta, I hope he's doing alright. Story 22. When I was in summer camp at age 9, one kid had a bizarre fixation for brooms and sweeping. When another boy was assigned to sweeping the cabin floors, the weird broom kid flipped the out and threatened to attack him if he didn't give him the broom so that he can clean the floor instead. Story 23. This was back in the late 1950s when my granddad was just a teenager 14 to 15 and he lived in a rural area in AZ. This relatively new family in town was arousing suspicion because the wife and kids were always banged up. My grandpa's stepfather spoke to the man of the house and told him that people didn't like that he was abusing his family and he needed to stop. When he didn't stop, my grandpa's stepdad excused himself from dinner one night and left the house for the evening. The following day, on the way to school, my granddad was on the bus and drove across a field where Family Man McGee was tied to one of the posts. Beat to holy, my granddad, the bus driver, and another older student helped untie the guy and get him onto the bus so that he could get back home. Nobody talked about it, but apparently my grandpa's stepdad and a couple other local men caught up to the guy and beat the out of him so that he'd know how his defenseless family had it. Story 24. Guy at the local Dunkin' Donuts has to throw out donuts after someone tried to sue them for donating poisoned donuts or whatever. He gladly throws them out and then walks back inside. Whatever happens to them isn't any of his business since it's trash anyway. He says he stopped trying to catch the mysterious garbage thief after 30 seconds of trying because he isn't paid enough to care. Story 25. So you know you'll have childhood friends and eventually they go their separate ways but you still stay in touch. My brother had a friend who got into meth and had this little 8-pound 8-month-old puppy. He would get high, blow smoke in his face, abuse him etc. One day he told a third friend in the group, man, I can't take care of this thing anymore. I'm just gonna dump him on the side of the road. So the second friend basically goes nah that and steals the dog the night before. A week goes by and he's being fostered at good guy dog thief's house. He then asks my brother, hey man, your brother want a dog? I have a 9-pound wiener dog who at the time could use a friend since I worked 9 hours a day and my wiener would be all alone. So of course I said yeah, let's go visit this guy. I show up and unlock the back gate and am immediately met at eye level with 3 Great Danes. And running around in the bushes is this comically small long-haired mutt. We go inside and I sit on the couch, and the pup runs right up to me, gets in my lap, and rolls over for a belly rub. It's like the guy never grew up in a meth house. Needless to say, my wiener has a friend now, edit wiener and friend tax. Story 26. There's a group that does guerrilla ramp building to help those with mobility issues around the city. They've stepped up in so many areas the city businesses have been ineffective in maintaining code, or outright illegally ignored it, to the detriment of citizens. I love them, donate to them whenever I can. Next is the guys who spray paint dicks all over potholes so the city has to come out fix them. If I see them doing this IRL one day, I'm stopping traffic to help, kiss them because thank you, edit I cannot spell. Story 27. Something I've seen. Guy 1 was watching Guy 2 scream loudly at his girlfriend who's just begging him to get in a taxi and go home. Guy 2 slaps girlfriend who half his size. Guy 1 steps up and knocks Guy 2 the out. I don't usually approve of violence, but in this situation it was needed to stop escalating. Something I've done. Part of my job is to stop shoplifters. Occasionally I get the vibe that they are stealing necessities out of desperation rather than something to flip for drug money or whatever. I turn a blind eye and let them leave. Story 28. I once counseled one of the students in my homeroom to quit school, get a GED, and enroll in an apprenticeship program. Had I been caught, I would have been fired since policy was to try to motivate all students to graduate. Kid was failing all his classes, which were 9th grade courses, but he was smart, working a full-time job, was already 18 years old, and had a crappy home life. Story 29. That video of the guy picking up litter thrown out of his car before physically throwing the passenger out. Edit. Unfortunately, the only link I could find without horrific voiceover was the son. Story 30. My family literally kidnapped our neighbor's cat and gave it to a friend because its family was mistreating him. I always felt bad about it, thinking of his previous family who suddenly didn't have their cat anymore, but it was all the better for the cat. Edit. Mistreating may be the wrong word. They would keep him outside all day despite he meowed constantly that he wanted to stay inside. We lived in an apartment. He was scared AF every time someone would walk by, until we started inviting him to us with some food. How they treated him while he was inside though. Story 31. A friend of mine had a roommate that stole a painting that was given to my friend. The roommate claimed that it was his and refused to return it, so I broke into their house at 2 in the morning and stole the painting back. I didn't tell anyone and kept it at my house until the roommate moved out. My friend and his painting are now reunited. Edit. Since people are asking about this, I'll give some more details. The kid who stole it was a real piece of work. He would do this kind of stuff to everyone. Multiple people that I know have had this complaint about him, but he also brags about stealing stuff from people. The painting was given to my friend as a present while he lived the roommate for the first time. They both moved out at different times but chose to live together in a new house. During the moving process, the roommate took the painting and hid it from my friend for weeks. Then at the new place he revealed the painting to my friend and explained that he wouldn't be giving it back. I caught wind of this story and decided to take matters into my own hands. Story 32. Slamming shut someone's open gas tank door while riding my bike through stopped traffic. I tried to do it gently, but it was loud. I went back and apologized to the guy. Story 33. A Brazilian drug trafficker has been praised on social media as a modern-day Robin Hood after he kidnapped 2 nurses, stole vaccines and syringes, and ordered the medical staff to inoculate residents in one of the poorest areas in the country's southeast. Thomaz Vieira Gomes has made headlines in the local press for acts of charity over the past year, even as authorities have issued successive warrants for his arrest. His most recent gesture of generosity, to combat yellow fever, which has swept poverty-stricken areas of Brazil, has seen him lauded primarily as a hero rather than a villain. The drug gang leader, known on the street as 2N, held hostage 2 nurses from a vaccination center before transporting them and their equipment to one of the poorest favelas in Rio de Janeiro. The Latin American television station Telesur reported that Gomez's gang oversaw the nurses as they administered vaccinations over a 2-hour period in the Salgueiro favela. Once they had finished administering the injections, they were returned to their workplace. In a report on the incident, the health workers said their kidnappers had treated them well and without any aggression. They said they had complied with the hostage takers because many Salgueiro residents hadn't been given access to immunization centers. Despite the illegality of Gomez and his gang's actions, officials have praised the hostage-taking. Carlos Mink, a state deputy and a former minister of the environment, wrote on Twitter that the immunizations had been done as an act of public service. Story 34. Not sure if this is strictly chaotic good, but a toddler once fell off the platform at a train station I was at in China, right before a train was coming in. A guy leapt down, grabbed that kid in a bear hug, and flattened the 2 of them up against the platform wall just barely an inch away from the train in the seconds before the train rushed in. Once the train stopped moving, guy gets the kid back on the platform, mom grabs the kid and cries, and guy just walks off onto the train like nothing had just happened, like he didn't just save a child's life and come within an inch of death himself to do it. Story 35. There was this tie-in infomercial about a lady who owns a marketplace and she went to visit the people who rented her place and just started getting angry and wrecking havoc, breaking weighing scales etc. She was filmed by the buyers and the video went viral and all these negative comments. Turns out, the sellers she was angry with were playing tricks with the customers like the weighing scale starts with 1 kilo. Story 36. My former employer had metered parking lot. The lot was heavily monitored and they'd ticket like the very minute you're expired. It was decidedly not good for business. People want to be able to linger at a coffee shop, besides, there was no reason for that lot to be metered anyhow. It was barely even adjacent to anything but our shop. Well, the meter just started breaking all the time. It would get fixed by the city, but then a few days later it'd be smashed or jammed or whatever. We asked if people would be towed and the city was like, no meter, no ticket. One night I stayed a bit late to clean a freezer. When I left, I spotted my boss breaking the freshly fixed meter. She was like, yep, guess I'm a criminal, Story 37. Star Trek DS9 in the pale moonlight. This is the last set of lines in the episode. So, I lied, I cheated, I bribed men to cover the crimes of other men, I am an accessory to murder, but the most damning thing of all, I think I can live with it, and if I had to do it all over again, I would. Garrick was right about one thing: a guilty conscience is a small price to pay for the safety of the Alpha Quadrant, so I will learn to live with it, because I can live with it, I can live with it. Computer, erase that entire personal log. Story 38. My community had just gone through a devastating flood. I was in charge of a fund to help people recover. We prioritized need based on income and were giving small grants to help people replace their household goods. The fund was almost depleted and I was helping the last few people get their grants. One woman was between apartments when the flood hit and had lost everything when her storage unit was flooded. I had worked with her for a couple of weeks and was ready to cut her a check when she called me in tears. She said that she realized that when she reported her income to me, she had neglected to report her ex-husband's income. She was married for the first part of the year, got divorced, hence the apartment move. She now worried that the extra bit of income for the first part of the year would put her over the income limit. I made sure she still got the grant. Story 39. Once in grade school, one of the kids was torturing an autistic kid. He was running behind him and hitting him with a stick. They both ran right by me and I just instinctively stuck my leg out and tripped the bully. He got hands and knees for hitting the concrete. I got detention and a note sent home to my parents. I didn't care. Would have done it again. Parents took me out for ice cream. They were so proud of me. Story 40. I punched a bully in the face right in front of everyone in the dining hall at school because he was bullying a handicapped boy. This guy got detention because you shouldn't solve violence with violence. Did detention proudly. Edit. Didn't think this would get gilded. Makes me even prouder I stood up to that bully. Bullies. There was a guy in my historical town of 800 named Casey. Casey was the town police. We didn't have an actual police force, just the sheriffs from a county an hour away. So Casey was the law. He rode around on his bike beating up people who did things like break into cars or harass people. Now Casey himself wasn't exactly an upstanding citizen. He moved around a lot and dabbled in meth, grew huge pot plants in the anise fields behind town, and generally was the kind of guy who looked shady, except everyone in town knew Casey and everyone trusted him completely. If someone had a problem with the admittedly large population of meth heads in town, they'd go find Casey and headbash heads in and shame people until they either left or towed the line. Imagine an incredibly white trash paladin with a series of crippling vices and a children's bicycle and you have Casey. I have a ton of great Casey stories if anyone is interested. Story 41. There was a protest in my city against the police's alleged violence against clubgoers. They protested by dancing all night on one of the city's main streets with gigantic speakers. LMAO. Story 42. I was at a psychedelic rock concert in New York City that involved quite a bit of light motioning and crowd surfing. A really fun show overall. If you've never crowd surfed before, there's two main ways that it's usually done. Either you get up on the stage and jump off hoping the crowd will catch you, or you ask a couple of strong-looking people around you to just lift you up. But at this concert there was a third way. There was a big intimidating-looking guy in the middle of the mosh pit who spent pretty much the entire concert down on all fours, getting people to jump off of his back to start crowd surfing. He especially tried to wave in people who seemed nervous to try it. Overall he must have gotten at least 50 people to crowd surf who had never tried it before. It was really a magical sight to behold. Edit. In case anyone's curious, it was a King Gizzard show, this one to be exact. Story 43. I was working in a daycare program for older kids and the kids really liked the Pokemon TCG. Me and a nerdy coworker casually talked to the kids about a bunch of different card games we played, like Yu-Gi-Oh and MTG. Some of the kids really wanted to see the cards from them, so my coworker agreed to bring some in to show. The next Friday he brings in 4 full decks for Yu-Gi-Oh and wants to teach them how to play. I was skeptical at first, but they enjoyed it a lot and the parents didn't seem to mind. It actually ended up being a lot of fun and surprisingly educational in one or two ways, so we talked about doing it again so the kids who missed out would get a chance. He agrees to bring them all back another day, except this time, he also brings 2 Force of Will decks. He told me days later that one of our oldest boys enjoyed Force of Will so much that he even let him keep the deck. I still have no idea how he got away with that, and as much as I liked that coworker, I'm still terrified in retrospect of his ability to see nothing wrong with giving a 10-year-old child a full deck of waifus. Story 44. Once I was driving in front of a car who went off-road multiple times and I could see was texting and driving. I assumed they were drunk because it was a bunch of college kids in a college town. So when we pulled up to a stop sign, I tapped my brakes a little too hard and he bumped me. They all flipped there. I told them it's not too bad and we would work it out. Offered them a ride home. I am convinced I saved their lives and whoever else they were going to hit that night. Story 45. A chalk artist practiced his art on a wall near his home, knowing that since it was chalk it would just last a day or two, a week at the most. A council worker liked it so much he made it permanent. Story 46. Found out that I could win the claw machines at an arcade on every turn until I ran out of money. Proceeded to empty them out and held on to the prize stuffed animals even though I didn't particularly care about having them. There were 2 2x1x1 cardboard boxes overflowing with stuffed animals. Few months later I found out that a relative on my step-parents' side, a 7-year-old girl, had a rare and aggressive form of cancer. It riddled her body and got particularly bad in her jaw. I gave her all of the stuffed animals via the step-relative that we were connected through. I was informed that she was very happy about the animals and smiled for what was the biggest and last time before her cancer impeded her jaw function too much. She passed only a few months later, and I never met her. I don't even know her name or who she is related to. But the goal was to give her some happiness in her short, painful, and lonely existence, not recognition for myself. Story 47. Guy who worked for me was caught by police in the middle of freeing 41 battery chickens. Don't know what he thought he was going to do with them once he had saved them. I think he might define this as CG, but I just found it hilarious. Had to provide him a character reference to keep him out of jail. Story 48. In my dorm we have old coin-operated laundry machines. I have a modified wire hanger that lets me run the machines without coins because I'm broke AF. I will sometimes activate all of the machines like they were fed quarters so other broke asses can wash and dry for free. Story 49. Might be too late, but I was on the commuter train during high school once with a friend. Said friend was really stressed out due to college applications additions and started crying and freaking out on the train. A hippie-looking backpacker started scooting towards us, patting my friend on the shoulder. Hey, don't cry. You want to see something cool? Want to see a squirrel? We watched as she pulled her backpack off her shoulder and pulled out a live baby squirrel. My friend sort of pet its lil head with a finger before I slapped his hand away and reminded him that it might have rabies or something. The backpacker shrugged and got off on the next stop. I mean, it got my friend to stop crying, and we laughed about it all the way home. Best chaotic good I've ever met in the wild. Story 50. Not a witness, but the perpetrator. ID bought one of those suction cup things to pop a small dent out of my car. I didn't like the idea of buying something ID only use once, so I started carrying it in my purse and popping any dents I'd see along the way between parking lots and stores. Story 51A. Once was in a train where some chavs were loudly mocking some mentally deficient dude. I told them off but they ignored me. Then they started to get physical and give the poor guy some light taps behind the head. Not enough to truly hurt but still, so I get up and ask them to stop. A few shoves and punches later, some hobo tells me to sit down. Hell, take care of it, and untied to Hudge dogs while looking at the chavs. They start running away and lock themselves in the bathroom. Then he tells his dogs to sit in front of it. They growled every time the other morons strive to get out. Then he comes back to the mentally challenged dude to ask him where he is going. Then says, it's not like I have somewhere else to be. I got out earlier than them, so I do not know if he let them out at some point, but it was fun to watch for sure.